Ju Haiwan is a bitchless man who has never felt the touch of a woman in his life. The only comfort he had in this world were his parents, who also tragically died in a car accident on a Christmas evening. So now he spends every Christmas walking aimlessly, while other people spend time with their wives and children. This makes Ju Haiwan feel even more lonely as he can only look at people who avoid them because of his tall stature. As he is walking aimlessly, Ju Haiwan notices a man in a Santa costume begging down the street. He feels pity for the old man, so he decides to spare him some money instead of spending it on beers and junk food. The old man feels thankful to Ju Haiwan and asks him if he has any wishes in his life. Ju Haiwan suddenly finds the old man to be a bit creepy, so he tries to walk away, but the old man won't let him. Ju Haiwan can only give up as he lies about winning a lottery ticket. The old man catches his lie and tells him to be honest and say the true wish, hidden deep down his heart. This makes Ju Haiwan a bit emotional, as he realizes that the only thing he wants in life is a happy family, a beautiful wife, and a cute daughter. The old man promises Ju Haiwan that his wish will definitely come true, and if he can't make it happen, he will cease to be a Santa. Ju Haiwan takes the old man to be a Santa fanatic, so he just leaves him alone and decides to head back to his crampy old apartment. He takes a late-night train, where all the other people around him are just couples. Ju Haiwan doesn't want to look at them anymore, so he just closes his eyes and falls asleep. This is the last time he sleeps on Earth, as the next moment he opens up his eyes he finds himself in a carriage locked up in a cage with a few other people. All of the people are in rather rough conditions and look as if they haven't eaten in days. Ju Haiwan seems to be in better condition, but he doesn't have any clothes on and feels a bit cold. He starts to look around and hear the soldiers driving the carriage speaking a foreign language, which he has no clue of. Aside from that, he also notices that all the people in the cage are tied to heavy shackles, which indicates that this must be a slave caravan. Ju Haiwan finally realizes that he has been Isekaid to a foreign world by that creepy Santa who even stole the job of truckkuan. Before reality can even set in, Ju Haiwan starts to shiver from the cold. Ju Haiwan is feeling a bit lost when suddenly his eyes fall on a dead slave, who still has his clothes on. Even though Ju Haiwan feels terrible for stealing from a corpse, he has no other choice or he will just die from the cold. After Ju Haiwan dresses up, he sits down and starts thinking about the creepy Santa. He really wonders if being a slave would fulfill his dream to have a loving family, or that Santa just wanted to mess with him. Either way, he hopes that this is just a dream, so that he can wake up and take a nice and warm bath. Just like this, a few days pass by and Ju Haiwan has assimilated quite well with other slaves. His cheeks have now sunk in and his appearance looks more disheveled. Ju Haiwan is dying of hunger and wants this to end as soon as possible. Just then, the carriage stops at a village, where the soldiers start to line up all the slaves to be auctioned off to the villagers. Ju Haiwan finally sees a glimmer of hope. Even though being sold as a slave is bad news, but he will at least be fed once a day as per the rules. Ju Haiwan is also confident in his looks and tall stature, and is sure that he will be sold to the richest man. However, the reality is far from his imagination, as no one even looks in his direction. This goes on for the rest of the journey, where every time the carriage stops at a village, all the other slaves are sold one by one except him. This makes Ju Haiwan lose all hope and he starts to give up on life. He curses the creepy Santa, who lied to him about giving him a life of happiness and brought him to this shithole of a place. Unable to bear the suffering, Ju Haiwan decides to end it all by plunging a nearby fork into his neck. Just then an angel appears in front of his face and gives him a helping hand. Ju Haiwan stops as he is blinded by the beauty of the woman in front of him, in whose hand is a piece of bread which looks more delicious than anything he has ever eaten at a 3 Michelin star restaurant. The woman tries to speak to him, but Ju Haiwan can't understand her words, not because he can't speak their language, but because he is also distracted by the woman's beauty and her cute daughter besides her. Previously, in a shabby rundown room, the beautiful woman, Liz, and her daughter are having dinner together. The portions are quite small. Liz is worried that her daughter might not be full, so she also gives her own portion to her. The young girl is happy, but she doesn't want her mother to go hungry, so she divides half of it for herself and gives the other half back to Liz. Liz is about to thank her when suddenly someone starts loudly banging on the door. Liz answers the door, to which the village chief tells her to not open the door and just listen to his words. He tells Liz that the soldiers have brought a bunch of slaves and they will be buying one of them to be her husband, so he urges her to get ready as she will be moving back to the mountain with him. Before leaving, the village chief also reminds her to have some food ready for the soldiers as they will be arriving by daybreak. This announcement comes as a shock for Liz, as her previous marriage was a nightmare for her. She was beaten up every day and had to endure a lot. Liz doesn't want to suffer once again, so she thinks of running away. But then she remembers the young girl, who is the daughter left behind by her previous husband from his previous marriage. She has just met her some time ago, so she doesn't want to leave her all alone. The young girl senses her mother's emotions, so she hugs her and tries to comfort her with her small arms. Lin stops crying after seeing this and puts the young girl to bed, who doesn't even have a name yet. That's why she is afraid that if she were to marry again, they both might have to go through another nightmare. That nightmare started a while back when she was sold by her father for a mere rabbit's skin. A man on the village mountain bought her, and before she could even unpack her stuff, the man arrived and started to beat her up for being late. Life didn't get any better afterwards, as she was continuously abused and tortured. Things would have long since broken if not for the young girl who came out of the darkness and became an angel in this hell. One day after beating up Liz, the man left for the forest to hunt animals and never returned. Liz later learned from the village chief that he was killed by an animal and his body was never found. Liz was thrilled to hear this news, but then the reality sank in. In these backward times, a woman without a husband was useless and couldn't even do anything on her own. That's why Lynn decided to face her nightmare, as she couldn't give up on her daughter after all. One morning, Liz gets ready and even bakes a few pieces of bread. She takes the food and heads outside where the carriages are parked. There her eyes fall onto a man who is trying to unalive himself by putting a fork through his neck. This reminds Liz of her own traumatic experiences with her previous husband and how she also once contemplated on unaliving herself using a fork. But in the end she couldn't do it, so Liz doesn't hesitate to run towards the man and stops him from unaliving himself as well. She then looks at his sunken cheeks and disheveled hair and offers a piece of bread to him. But before Liz can say something to him, the village chief arrives and tells her to go back to her hut and that he will handle the purchase of the slaves. Liz and the young girl take one last look at the man and then leave. The man is none other than Zhu Heiyuan, and he can't believe that someone just offered him a piece of bread when he was literally about to unalive himself. Zhu Heiyuan forgets everything else as his mind is solely focused on the food. But before he can even take a bite of it, the soldiers kick him out of the cell and present him in front of the village chief. Zhu Heiyuan and two other slaves kneel on the ground as the soldiers surround them. Just then, a soldier grabs a knife and cuts into their arms to make them bleed. He then smears their blood over two pieces of paper which start glowing in dim blue light. Zhu Heiyuan is shocked to see this, as he wonders if this is some sort of magic. This makes him even more curious about this world where slavery is still legal and people can even use magic. After the contracts are signed, a soldier mumbles something into the village chief's ears, who nods in response before walking towards Zhu Heiyuan to check on his condition. Meanwhile, the mother and daughter duo arrive back at the hut where a woman from the village gives them supplies for a few days and tells Liz that her new husband doesn't know their language, so she might have a bit of a problem communicating with him. The woman notices that Liz is still traumatized, so she informs her that her new husband might be a commoner, but his hands are as soft as the nobles. She also assures her that no one liked her previous husband and they only tolerated him because he was a mountain keeper. So she tells Liz that if her new husband is also good at this job, they might just be able to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Linz tells her that she doesn't need her husband to be good or anything, as she just hopes that he won't be a violent man. Just then, the village chief opens the door and brings Liz's new husband inside the hut. Liz is surprised to see that it's the same man who was about to unalive himself a few moments ago. Upon seeing him this close, Liz finally realizes how big he is, which makes her a bit scared. Zhu Heiyuan also notices that it's the same woman who offered him food but doesn't understand why she is shaking so much, before he can even learn what's going on. The village chief grabs his arm and brings him side by side to Liz and her daughter. He then forcefully locks their arms together, making them look like an awkward newly married couple. Zhu Heiyuan doesn't understand any of the stuff they are saying, but from the vibes and his current position, he can understand that he is being married off to the woman. This reminds him of the creepy Santa, and realizes that he wasn't telling a lie when he said that he will give him a cute rabbit-looking wife and an adorable mongoose daughter. Zhu Heiyuan feels happy to finally live his dream, but he also can't help but get angry at the creepy Santa for making him go through all of the trouble. Zhu Heiyuan promises to himself that if he meets that Santa ever again, he will make him go through things even worse. Zhu Heiyuan's angry expression scares Liz and the young girl, who are already traumatized from their previous experiences. Meanwhile, the village chief is glad to see Zhu Heiyuan full of energy, as the mountain keeper job is tough and only a strong person can do it. That's why he decides to test Zhu Heiyuan whether he is capable enough of being a mountain keeper or not. So he sends a villager in front of Zhu Heiyuan, who tries to test his strength through handshake. Even though Zhu Heiyuan doesn't understand their language, he can feel their intentions, so he makes sure to put his whole strength in it. The villager instantly regrets the challenge, as Zhu Heiyuan almost broke his hand and he didn't even look like he was trying either. The village chief is satisfied and decides to move on to the next step, which is to test his hunting skills. The chief hands a bow over to Zhu Heiyuan and asks him to shoot a wild rabbit. Zhu Heiyuan has never held a bow in his life and has only seen the people at Olympics use it. He tries to mimic their form and shoots an arrow which barely misses the rabbit. The village chief is still satisfied with his bow shooting skills and claps for him. Zhu Heiyuan is still unsure what is going on when suddenly Liz and the young girl walk up to him with a basket in her hand. Zhu Heiyuan finds her to be extremely beautiful and can't believe that she is his bride now. This makes Zhu Heiyuan blush, which makes the village chief realize that this guy has never been around in his life. So he decides to leave them alone so they can get used to each other as soon as possible. With no other person besides them, Liz becomes even more anxious as she doesn't know how to deal with her new husband. But she knows that she still has to perform her duties as a wife, so she spreads a cloth for them on the ground and takes out the food from the basket to serve him. She also serves a portion to the young girl and takes some for herself as well. Things are quite awkward as they eat around each other, but Zhu Heiyuan doesn't know how to fix that as well. He can't speak their language, so he can't even introduce himself. This makes him curse out at that creepy Santa even more who dropped him in a random place like this, but he is still happy as he would have never had a family like this without Santa's help. After they finish their meal, the village chief returns to take them to their mountain cabin. The path to the mountain is long and steep, which tires a pair of malnourished mother and child. Zhu Heiyuan notices that they are both struggling, and decides to help them as he is the man of the family after all. He approaches Liz, who instantly becomes scared, wondering what he is trying to do. Zhu Heiyuan is a gentleman who would never touch a woman without her consent, but now that he can't speak the language nor he has the time to explain, so he just picks both of them up and starts walking to the top. As he is walking, he realizes how malnourished they must be to be this lightweight. This makes him even more motivated to learn the language so that he can communicate with them better and have them eat good food to grow big and healthy. Even though Liz doesn't know what he is thinking, she can feel the determination on his face. This softens her guard against him as she even starts brushing off the sweat from his face. Soon they all arrive at the top of the mountain top, where Zhu Heiyuan thanks the village chief for showing them the way. After the village chief leaves, Zhu Heiyuan turns to the mountain cabin where he will be living from now. The shabby cabin is in terrible condition, which makes Zhu Heiyuan shiver as he realizes that he might need to sleep in the cold again. While cursing the cold, he enters the cabin and finds Liz standing inside, devastated with tears in her eyes. He wants to ask her what happened, but Liz runs past him, leaving him standing there all alone. After running away for some time, Liz stops by a lake where she reveals the reason why she ran away earlier. As it turns out, someone has broken into the cabin and had stolen everything, whether it be crockery, table, bow, hammer, knife, and even their farming hoe. With everything gone, she can't even fix the broken cabin, which means they would have to sleep in the cold, completely defenseless to wild beasts. As Liz is feeling hopeless about the future, Zhu Heiyuan appears and is happy to finally find her. He notices that Liz has been crying all this time, so he sits beside her and puts his hand on top of her head to console her. Even though Liz can't understand his words, she can sense that he is trying to console her. This makes Liz happy, but she still feels helpless as she doesn't know how they will survive in this harsh place. Their cabin is all broken down and her new husband doesn't look like someone who has ever done manual labor in his life. But that's something she can even do herself, but the real problem is the lack of food. As for that, they need to hunt, but Zhu Heiyuan doesn't look like someone who knows how to handle a weapon. But even though her head is full of negative thoughts, her heart feels at peace. She feels relieved seeing Zhu Heiyuan and is assured that he will make everything right for them. These feelings overwhelm Liz and tears stream down her face. Zhu Heiyuan lets her bawl out for a while as he tells her that in his original world he lost his parents when he was still young. Even though the world felt hopeless, he still managed to push through, and he is glad that he did that because otherwise he wouldn't have met her. That's why he wants to make sure that she and her daughter are both protected and well provided for their entire life. Liz can't understand what he is saying, but she knows that he cares for her. This makes her completely let go of her guard as she hugs Zhu Heiyuan and lets out all of her stored up emotions. But when the young girl sees her mother crying, she believes that Zhu Heiyuan must have bullied her like her previous father. So she tries to protect Liz and take her away from Zhu Heiyuan. But he pulls her in and gives her a hug as well. Zhu Heiyuan still doesn't know who the young girl's father is or why Liz gave him food. But he knows one thing, that they are his family now. So he promises to himself that he will become the best husband and best dad and give them the best life ever so they will never have to cry again. So after the family is done with trauma bonding, they return back to the cabin. There everyone sits in silence awkwardly as they don't know how to progress things after crying in front of each other. Zhu Heiyuan eventually decides to break the silence by introducing himself to them. If they can't understand Korean, he just pronounces his name slowly so they can understand what he is saying. Fortunately, Liz and the little girl are both clever and they immediately get his name right. He then points at them to tell him their names as well. Liz goes first and introduces her name and how to pronounce it. Zhu Heiyuan praises her name and then turns to the little girl and asks her to introduce herself as well. The little girl remains silent as she was never named by her previous father. Liz also didn't name as their life was already too hectic after that man died. Zhu Heiyuan can't imagine someone not having a name, so he decides to name her instead. He thinks about a few names and eventually picks out Dorothy as it's the name from one of his favorite childhood stories, The Wizard of Oz. The little girl likes the name very much and thank you Zhu Heiyuan for giving her such a pretty name. Zhu Heiyuan also feels happy for her and hopes to give her the life of a princess just like how Dorothy had in the books. Later in the evening, Zhu Heiyuan is outside splitting logs that will be used for burning at the fireplace for the night. Lin stands a bit far away from him as she recounts all the things that have happened today. She silently mumbles his name, which sounds so elegant even though it's from a language that she has no idea of. This makes her curious who Zhu Heiyuan really is and where he comes from. Ever since she was born, no man has ever treated her right, whether it was her father or later her husband. That's why she can't understand why Zhu Heiyuan is so kind to her. While Liz is lost in her thoughts, Zhu Heiyuan notices her standing in the distance, so he waves at her and even shouts her name. This brings her out from her gloomy thoughts as she closely takes a look at Zhu Heiyuan for the first time. She notices that he has black hair and black eyes, which sounds similar to the legend that she heard recently. In that legend it is mentioned that a faraway kingdom was at war, so they decided to summon a hero from another world, and that hero also has black hair and black eyes. But she quickly dismisses these thoughts as no hero would ever be in such a rundown village like this, moreover becoming someone's slave. As she is thinking about his identity, Zhu Heiyuan has already made his way towards her, and upon closely examining him she realizes that his hair and eyes are more towards the brown shade, so he is just a normal bloke who is just a bit taller than most people. This puts her heart at ease, which also makes her a bit embarrassed as she doesn't understand why she would even feel something like this in the first place. Zhu Heiyuan is amused to see her have all sorts of mixed emotions and can't help but give her a nice pat on the head. Liz enjoys his touch and feels all warm on the inside. Her relaxed expression makes her look even more adorable, which attracts Zhu Heiyuan like a bee towards flowers as he gives her a light peck on her lips. The sudden kiss freezes Liz, who never expected Zhu Heiyuan to do something like this. Zhu Heiyuan is also baffled by his actions and decides to run away to avoid embarrassment. Zhu Heiyuan also feels mad at himself as he can't believe that he randomly kissed Liz even though they have only met for one day. As he is thinking about how to address this situation, he realizes that he has walked way too deep into the forest. He looks around to see any path leading back to the cabin when suddenly he feels a heavy pressure behind him. Zhu Heiyuan slowly turns back and finds a menacing wolf nearly his own size standing in front of him. Zhu Heiyuan is scared out of his wits. He struggles to choose whether to escape or stay there to fight the wolf. He grabs the stick on the ground firmly and prepares himself mentally for the battle. The wolf is also prepared to hunt its target, so it immediately lunges on Zhu Heiyuan, who only has a stick to defend himself. Zhu Heiyuan blocks the attack by putting the stick between himself and the wolf. The wolf's teeth are stuck in the stick, so Zhu Heiyuan uses this opportunity to land a solid punch on the wolf's face. This makes the wolf extremely furious, who bites down into the stick so hard that it breaks into two pieces. With its jaw freed, the wolf is able to use its deadly set of teeth once again. Zhu Heiyuan also knows that defense isn't an option anymore, so he decides to strike the wolf first, but the wolf blocks his punch by biting down into his arm, which leaves a gaping wound onto his wrist. Zhu Heiyuan flinches back due to the pain, which feels as if his whole arm is on fire, but when he looks on his arm he finds literal flames coming out from his flesh. Zhu Heiyuan is shocked and wonders if these flames are made of magic. This makes him more confident in his battle against the wolf, who also seems to be scared of the magic flames. The wolf tries to back away, but Zhu Heiyuan doesn't give him any opportunity and starts to beat down the wolf with his flaming fist. Punch after punch, the wolf continues to howl, but Zhu Heiyuan doesn't show any mercy and continues to beat it down till it's completely silent. After the wolf is taken care of, Zhu Heiyuan falls onto the ground and tries to recover his stamina. While he is catching some breath, he looks at his arm, which was literally on fire a few moments ago. He tries to find any marks of injuries or burns but can't find them anywhere, which makes him wonder if he was really able to use magic without any guidance. This reminds him of those novels that he used to read in his free time, so he tries to recreate the magic by calling out various spells such as Fireball, Firestorm, Firewall, but none of them work. He even tries calling an incantation that he read in the novels, but even that doesn't work. Zhu Heiyuan gives up as he realizes that there must be a trick behind using magic at his command, but he is 100% sure that he definitely possesses magic because his arm that was supposed to have a gaping wound is now completely healed. Zhu Heiyuan wants to learn to control his magic as soon as possible, as this will not only make him a more capable hunter, but he will also be able to heal his family, especially since there is no doctor on this mountain. Xu Heiyuan clenches his fists as he promises himself to quickly get better and stronger so that he can protect his family and provide them with a much better life. He doesn't want to be called a curse anymore, someone who brings death to everywhere he goes. He still remembers that after the death of his parents, his grandfather took him in as his close relatives weren't willing to take him in. But right after taking him in, his grandfather also died very soon, which caused all of his cousins to beat him up for being an evil creature who was plagued by a curse which kills everyone who takes care of him. Xu Heiyuan throws these painful memories at the back of his head as he has more important work to do. He quickly wants to take care of the wolf as its blood might attract other predators, so he picks up the wolf on his shoulders and takes it back to the mountain cabin to process it and turn it into meat for his family. Back at home, Liz and Dorothy are preparing for dinner when suddenly they notice a wolf head glaring into the window. Dorothy starts to cry as the predator is far too scary for her. Liz hears her cries and immediately grabs a knife to protect Dorothy from the danger. Liz scaredly looks out of the window and is relieved to find that it's only Xu Heiyuan who is carrying a wolf on his shoulders. But then she notices the injuries on his face and rushes outside to check on his condition. It doesn't take much for her to realize that Xu Heiyuan must have faced a great danger, or otherwise he wouldn't have been this badly injured. Xu Heiyuan tries to calm her down as he explains that it was just a few minor scratches and that everything is fine now. Liz can't understand his words, but she can sense that he's trying to tell her that he's fine now. She quickly pulls him into a hug, which surprises Xu Heiyuan, who didn't think Liz would take such an initiative. Dorothy also hugs his knees as she tries to tell him that she was so worried for him. Despite their inability to speak each other's language, Xu Heiyuan can tell that they were extremely worried for him. This also makes him sad as he promised to himself that he won't make them cry, but it hasn't even been a day and he already broke his promise. The following morning, after everyone calmed down, Xu Heiyuan starts to process the wolf by skinning its hide and separating the meat from its bones. Xu Heiyuan used to watch his grandfather, who was fond of reining animals and often butchered some by himself for special occasions. So even though he knows the basic techniques, he realizes that butchering is far harder than his grandfather made it look in front of him. But even though it's hard, he still has to do it for his family. So he is about to get back to work when suddenly, Liz enters the barn and gives him a basket to put all the meat inside of it. Xu Heiyuan is happy to receive her help and wants to thank her. But his pronunciation of the language is very awkward, so Liz helps him pronounce it correctly. Liz feels very happy as no one has ever thanked her before in her life. This also makes Liz realize that she had so many first-time moments with jujitsu. Whether it be her first thank you and previously even her first kiss. But this also makes her wonder whether it was also Jujitsu Man's first kiss, or had he kissed another woman before in his life. As a woman, she can't help but feel jealous of whoever had Jujitsu Man's first kiss. This makes her a bit sad and her heart can't help but wander into wrong directions. But she forces herself to come back to reality as she still has to help Jujitsu Man in putting all the meat into the bucket. But Jujitsu Man doesn't let her do any of the dirty work, which makes Liz even more confused, as this is supposed to be a woman's job and yet Jujitsu Man is doing it as it's natural for him. Just then, Jujitsu Man walks over to her and leans closer to her face. This makes Liz's heart race in excitement as she wonders if he is going to kiss her on the lips once again. Liz instinctively closes her eyes, but Jujitsu Man only kisses on the forehead, which makes her look all stupid for expecting a mature kiss. Jujitsu Man notices this small detail, so he leans forward once again. But this time, Liz forces herself to keep her eyes open as she doesn't want to fall for the previous trick once again. However, Jujitsu Man never intended to trick her this time, so he goes straight for her lips, which shocks Liz, who didn't expect him to kiss her out of nowhere. Liz is already embarrassed enough, but then her eyes fall onto Dorothy and wonders if she saw them. Unable to contain her embarrassment, Liz runs away from the barn like a Looney Tune character. Now that Liz isn't there to help him, Dorothy feels the need to help Jujitsu Man. Even though her tiny hands aren't that big of a help, Jujitsu Man still thanks her, which makes the little girl very happy. Jujitsu Man takes the meat bucket and enters the main cabin, which smells awful because of the rotting smell. Jujitsu Man doesn't understand why Liz is drying the hide inside their living space. But when he sees her cresting the skin, he realizes that the skin must be extremely precious to her. This makes Jujitsu Man feel very naive, as there is a lot that he doesn't understand about this world. In his previous life, the things which were considered normal are extremely precious in this world. So therefore, he not only needs to change his mentality but also learn more about the trade and how money works here, as without the basic finance knowledge it is bound for him to later or sooner be scammed by cunning people. So while Liz is busy curing the meat, Jujitsu Man decides to head back into the woods to do some extra work. Liz tries to stop him as she is worried that he might get injured once again, but Jujitsu Man assures her that he's only going to cut trees this time, so he will be safe. Inside the woods, Jujitsu-man finds a small-sized tree and decides to use it for practice. Normally he would have loved to find an oak tree, as he heard that it's the best wood for a fireplace, but unfortunately he doesn't know how to differentiate between trees, so he can only focus on what's on his hand. Marking the place to cut, Jujitsu-man tightens his grip on the axe as he lunges it at the tree, but his grip is still too loose, and the axe slips away from his hand. Jujitsu-man feels embarrassed as he looks around to see if anyone saw him. After a few hours, Jujitsu-man returns back with a sack full of wooden logs. Even though he promised Liz that he will not get himself injured, the axe is still a difficult tool to use, so he was injured quite a few times. Liz is worried and immediately runs over to tend to his wounds. Dorothy also wants to mimic Liz and help Jujitsu, but she scoops some water from the jar and tries to sprinkle it on Jujitsu to make him feel refreshed. Even though she makes quite a mess while trying to do so, Jujitsu-man still appreciates her feelings and pats her on the head. After Liz has tended to his wounds, all three of them sit down at the dinner table, as Liz serves the wolf meat that Jujitsu-han hunted yesterday. The family is happy to eat meat after a long time, especially Dorothy, who eats so much that she instantly falls into a food coma. Jujitsu-man picks up the sleeping Dorothy and takes her to the bed, so she can sleep peacefully without being too cold. In the meantime, Liz heats up some water for Jujitsu-man so that he can wash off all that dirt and grime from his body. In this world, which is still in its medieval times, the wife has to clean her husband by herself using a washcloth. Liz tries to wipe off Jujitsu-man, who seems to be enjoying this feeling of being taken care of, but Liz feels too embarrassed doing it as his chiseled muscles keep distracting her. Jujitsu-man can't help but feel a bit cheeky as he grabs her hand and leans forward for a kiss. The sudden kiss turns into an intimate moment and both of the newlywed couples can't contain it anymore, and the rest is history. This was the first time Liz ever slept so peacefully. Before this, even when she was a child, every night was a traumatic experience. Her family was very poor, so they all shared the same room. This made it hard for her parents to share intimate moments, which frustrated her father, who would abuse her mother right in front of her and her siblings. Every morning, they would wake up to their mother all bruised up and sobbing in silence. Every night, Liz would worry about her future and wondered if one day she would be in the same shoes as her mother. But fortunately, she met Jujitsu, a man who treated her like a queen and her daughter like a princess. Every morning, she wakes up to the crackling of logs which burn every night to keep them warm. In the morning, she hoped to wake up in the arms of the man who was so kind to her. Liz knows that the nights between couples aren't this sweet, so she cherishes every bit of this happiness that Jujitsu-man has made possible for her to experience. Later in the morning, while everyone is sleeping, Liz gets up from the bed and starts doing the usual house chores. Even though she is reluctant to leave Jujitsu-man's comfortable embrace, she still has to do her wifely duties, as this is the only way she can repay Jujitsu-man for taking care of them so much. Despite her traditional thinking, Jujitsu-man is still a man from modern age, so he also wakes up from bed and starts to help her in putting off the fire and doing other basic tasks. He also tries to converse with her, using the little bit of language that he has been able to learn recently. This includes words such as honey, which makes Liz very embarrassed as she is still not used to being so loved. But this only makes Jujitsu-man tease her even more, as he loves to see her cherry-like face become even more red. While both the couple are flirting with each other, Dorothy also wakes up from sleep, not because she heard their voices, but because she wants to eat meat which she has been dreaming about all night. She is worried that if she wakes up in the morning, the meat might disappear. However, when she looks into the bucket and finds that all the meat is still there, she becomes relieved and excited for breakfast. Seeing the little girl be so happy to eat meat, Jujitsu-man becomes even more passionate about going into the forest to hunt even more animals. He doesn't care whether he faces wolves or lions, he just wants his family to always have meat to eat. That's why this time he even brings an axe with him, which will be a better weapon than a mere stick from the ground. Gripping the axe tightly, Jujitsu-man walks deep into the forest, where he senses a heavy presence which feels even more suffocating than the monstrous wolf he hunted the other day. This makes Jujitsu-man grip his axe even tightly as he waits for the beast to come out. But instead of a beast, there comes out a hooded man. Previously, the hooded man was roaming the forest as usual when he came across a patch of blood which seemed to be that of a large animal like a wolf. This surprised the old man, who was curious to know which group from the village came to the mountains to hunt the wolf. That's when he decided to stalk the mountain to find those people. But after a few days of stalking, he only found Jujitsu-man, who had a huge build and strong muscles. At first, the hooded man thought that it might have been Jujitsu-man, but when he observed his activities, he realized that Jujitsu-man can't even properly wield an axe. This increased his confusion, so he decided to confront Jujitsu-man by himself today. But when he finally saw Jujitsu-man up close, the old man noticed the wolf bite mark on his forearm. He could not believe that such a deep wound could heal this quickly. In fact, a normal villager might even die in a few days from infection as there are no doctors here on the mountain. But now Jujitsu Man stands in front of him without a speck of injury on his body. This can only mean one thing, that Jujitsuan is a mage and a powerful one on that. This realization brings joy to the old man who had almost given up on his revenge. But now that he has found Jujitsuan, who was a talented magician, he knows that if he plays his cards carefully, he might finally be able to have his revenge. The hooded man might seem old now, but back in his youth when he was still full of energy, he decided to become the mountain caretaker for a noble's territory. This job had a huge opportunity, as if there was ever a war he would be called to participate in it as a soldier. And if he achieved great merit, the noble might grant him an official status, raising him from a mere commoner to an elite. That's how he arrived at this mountain, which had a peaceful village at the bottom full of resources. But there was only one problem. To gather firewood, the villagers had to go deep inside the forest. The forest is a scary place and most villagers would never return back. So after he became a mountain keeper, the hooded man also had to gather wood by going deep into the dense woods of the forest. But one day, he went too deep inside and was gravely injured, and even broke one of his legs. Since a mountain keeper needed all of their limbs, the hooded man's dream life was already over. He was already on the verge of despair when he stumbled into goblins, a species of monsters which kidnapped human women and made them bear their children. The hooded man was barely able to escape, but due to his injuries, he was forced to retire and spent his whole life in the village. But there was not a single day in his 20 years of life that he didn't hate the goblins. That's why he continued to look for an opportunity to take his revenge on them until he finally met Jujitsu. Jujitsu, when brought hope into his life, he not only had a strong body, but his body also had strong regeneration. On top of this, the hooded man is also sure that Jujitsu is a magician, so he decides to spend the rest of his time teaching Jujitsu on how to become the strongest hunter. In the latest time, the hooded man has been observing Jujitsu. Jujitsu has also been watching him, staying cautious that he might do something out of nowhere. But when the old man suddenly tells him that he wants to take him as a student and teach him everything knows, Jujitsu is taken aback as he doesn't know what he means by that. The following day, Jujitsu eats breakfast and gets ready to train. But this time he isn't alone, as he has the hooded man to teach him the skills to become a professional hunter. Even though Jujitsu agreed to accept his help, he still doesn't trust the man as he seems too shady, just like his greedy manager back on Earth. So he decides to keep him out of his family's life and just let him wait outside. By the time Jujitsu is ready to head out, Liz packs him a lunch as she knows he will be out for a long time. After packing his bag, Jujitsu says his goodbye to both Liz and Dorothy as they also see him off. Even though this might be a normal routine for other people. But Jujitsu still can't get used to it, as he feels way too blessed to have such a beautiful and loving family. That's why he has to leave home and train to become even stronger. The hooded man doesn't know his motivation, but he is glad to see Jujitsu motivated to learn nonetheless. He just wants to hide the fact about goblins from Jujitsu until the contract is formed. Once the contract is formed, Jujitsu won't be able to escape even if he is scared of goblins, and he takes Jujitsu deep into the forest where he orders him to follow how he walks.